want to thank everybody for being here today. We're going to briefly go over our Tier 1 systems, and then we're going to move into our Tier 2 systems for PBIS. Tier 1 campus procedures, you guys should mostly know this. Some of you teachers that are new, you might want to just focus in and make sure you know it. Our REACH guidelines, respect and responsibility, eager to learn, awesome attitude, caring, cooperative citizen, and high expectation. You guys all know these. These are on the bottom of our horseshoes. And when we turn in a horseshoe, this designates what the behavior that the kid demonstrated was. So for example, when you do turn in the horseshoe, if the kid's being really respectful, you circle the R. If the kid's working really high in class, it's high expectations, you circle the H. These are our common area expectations. Everything is pretty much the same from last year. We have common area expectations posted in the hallway for arrival, dismissal, hallway procedures, playground, cafeteria, the restroom. I did want to make one note. If you are in here from kinder and even first grade, every year in past years I have come to your classroom and I have helped your kids learn their bathroom procedures, especially your boys. Sometimes you guys get kids that like to go where they're not supposed to go. Even though I'm no longer doing behavior support, if you need me to come to your classroom to talk to your kids during my lunch, I'd be more than happy to do that for you. Next slide, please. So we have some school-wide reinforcement systems. The important part of PBIS, of course, it is the positive behavior that we are trying to reinforce, not the negative behavior. So we have the horseshoe, and the horseshoe is the catch-all. I really have been amazed, especially this year and the last 2 years, the amount of horseshoes that I see teachers giving out. There's been years where the morning or the afternoon announcements, there were no horseshoes, and that kind of makes you feel sad. And it makes me excited. I actually, when my kids, when my 5th graders get a horseshoe, since 5th grade is the least group that gets a horseshoe, I've got a bag of candy over there, and we do a little candy party, and I like throw them up in the air in front of them, and they get really excited. So it's always about the celebration with the positive behavior. Starline, I've seen an increase in this. Classes who receive a compliment from any teacher receive a star that they can put out in front of the room. If you get 10 stars, then you will get a free day in the gym. All you have to do is email the coaches. One thing I would like to say is a lot of times I see the chart filled up once, and then we're like, okay, we did it one time. You can reuse that chart. You can keep going and have your kids fill up those stars. Perfect attendance is something that's been turned to the teachers. If you look back there, you can see where a kid has written P and E really, really poorly. I keep perfect attendance in my room since it is not a school-wide initiative. When my kids spell out perfect attendance, if you rotate like we do in 5th grade, they get recess in the morning. I give them an extra 15-minute recess when they come back to me at 1 o'clock. Our perfect attendance numbers, I believe, based off of the last PLC, was about 95% across the school, and I believe 95% is our goal. And also this makes a good student job. It gives, students are always looking for something to do, something to shine. Next one, please. Lunchroom has changed a lot. Used to be lunchroom, we'd have lunch movies. We would do, if you could get 25 stickers, the kids would get an extra long lunch, and then they would be able to watch a movie during their time. I really, really recommend that as a classroom teacher, check on your cups and make that reward in your classroom. When my kids come back at 1 o'clock, if they're on green, we do a brain break. They get an extra, it's just 5 minutes. They get a brain break, they get a dance around. We do Simon Says, any kind of game, just as a reward so that they stay on green. I think to help this though, there's been a lot more TAs and teachers in the cafeteria, and overall the lunchroom noise has been really good. Reach Day, again, is planned by the grade levels. It's not planned by me anymore. It's not planned by the administration. I strongly recommend that when you do Reach Day, get them out of the building. I don't really feel like Reach Day where we say, we're gonna let them bring cookies and watch a movie. That's more of a fun Friday. Get them out of the building, make a field trip, find out what's going on. There are multiple parks within walking distance of this school. Even though they'd be playing the exact same games, if you walk them 3 minutes to the park up the street, it is a whole different experience to them. They have left the school. They are super excited. Next one. And I want to go over this with everybody. If anybody wants to refute this, I would appreciate it, but this is what I remember. Woodard, you're really good at this. To qualify for Reach Day, you can have no office referrals. You can have no more than 1 in class. Is it 2? All right, so no more than 2 in class. No more than 2 absences, and no more than 3 tardies. So that's kind of important because it used to be that I kind of felt like the teachers needed to drive this, but I've had multiple teachers come to me and say, well, I've got little brother or little sister in this class, and when you let your kid go, and I make the little brother or little sister stay, then of course I'm going to get a call from mom, and mom's going to be angry at me when you're the one that let the older brother or older sister go. So we need to make sure we're on the same page with that. Next one, please. The specialist clipboard is really new this year and last year. I think we're getting better at using it. So the only thing I want to update on this is 2 things. Number 1, when your kids go to specials, it's important that your clipboard goes in case there is a fire drill or a real fire emergency. That's what the coaches or the art teacher or the PE teacher use to make sure that all of your kids made it out of the building safely. And so not just for drills, but for real emergencies. And then of course, we also, especially for those grade levels, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Is everybody here from 2nd? You guys rotate? Okay, so almost everybody now rotates. So when you have a substitute, that clipboard really helps the substitutes know who's in their class. Take-home folder used to be the PBIS folder. We went back to the take-home folder. I personally prefer the PBIS folder, but I think I got outvoted on this one. So it is still a really good communication piece, and this is a good way to keep a copy of the behavior log. One of the reasons why I like the behavior folder is because there was prongs in the middle. So if I put the behavior log in the middle, and I've been trying to get a hold of that parent, and they've never answered the phone or they've lost their phone, that log is still in there, and therefore there's one more opportunity for the parents to know what their kids are doing, what's going wrong, especially if they're that parent you can never get a hold of. If it's in the middle, it's very hard for a kid to say, I don't know what happened to it, I lost it, I don't know where it went. Where in this, it is somewhat feasible that it got pulled out or it fell out. A reminder for specialists, and this was true 3 years ago, it's still true today. When a student gets an office referral in a classroom, it's the specialist's job to call. If it's a minor offense, we track it on the clipboard. If it's in class, the specialist should probably still call, but that's a call that could probably wait till the end of the day. If there is an office referral that happens during the class period, the specialist should either call down somebody from the office, or they should wait for the teacher to come to the class, and then they can make the call while the teacher picks up their kids. Go ahead. I don't even remember that one. Go ahead. All right, the behavioral RTI flowchart. Keep clicking until it pops up, please. Okay, so tier 1, as you guys know, are all the strategies that we use day to day in our classroom and in our building. It helps affect about 80% of the kids. Tier 2 is going to cover about 15% of the kids, and those are kids who may need some sort of modification, some sort of accommodation, some little extra help, maybe a contact with parent occasionally. And then the tier 3 kids are our most aggressive kids. And they really shouldn't be more than 5 to 10% of our kids. And I would say 10% is a large number. If you think about how many kids are at Bean, I know it's a little bit over 500. So that's saying that we have 50 kids in tier 3 support. And I don't believe we have 50 kids that require tier 3. I would say it's probably closer to 10 or less. So I like to think that our campus is well inside the good numbers. And I feel like that is because we've got good teachers, we've got good PBIS, and we've got good administration. Keep going. This just talks about how we do the tiers. The first tier, we generally do not put a kid into SST within the first 6 to 8 weeks of behavior unless it is extreme behavior. After 6 to 8 weeks, we can start doing some PBIS strategies, and then we can, if those aren't working, then we are going to go into tier 3, which is where we will call an SST meeting or a PBIS meeting or something. This is where we start to get into review 360s. This is where we get into making contracts. Special education, just a reminder, if you have a student who is in special education, who is a behavior issue, you do not take them to SST or PBIS, they go through the ARD committee. So tier 2 or not, tier 2 is persistent patterns of negative behavior that is not responsive to tier 1 interventions and supports and threatens the learning or safety of students or staff. I always like to tell a kid who's not doing their job, who's loud or disruptive, I explain to them that they are stealing somebody else's education time. Usually even the loudest, most obnoxious kids understand that their behavior isn't just reflecting on me, it is reflecting on the other students, and it's making it hard for them to learn. All right, we're going to do a little bit of role play. Joseph blurts during whole class instruction every day. He blurts on task. He blurts off task. His teacher kept tally marking during a 15-minute period every day for a week. On average, he blurted 10 times in 15 minutes. The teacher has tried a seat change, private conversations, parent conference, and academies. The behavior not has improved over the course of several weeks. Tier 2, Tier 1, Tier 3, what do you guys think it is? I see lots of 2s. Tier 2 is behavior. Go ahead, Betty. That is correct. So this is significant behavior and does require some sort of support. It's Tier 1 supports. The normal things that you have running your classroom are not successful for the student, so we need to move on to something else. Jamie came into school crying this morning and has been sitting in the hallway since the first bell. She refuses to go anywhere to calm down and will not respond to directions. The crying is beginning progressively louder and angrier. The principal has tried to call her parents, but doesn't have a working number. Nothing seems to work. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. Tier 1. It's Tier 1 because it's just one day. It's not a persistent pattern of behavior. Obviously, she needs some sort of crisis intervention. She probably needs to talk to a counselor. She probably needs some time where she's not in the classroom. It is an extreme behavior, but she's not Tier 3 because she's not going to have one day and they're going to say, oh, we need to put her in PBIS. We need to start worrying about sending her to STAR or ACEs or something like that. When Cheyenne is asked to work with her peers on an assignment, she becomes physically aggressive if they do not do exactly what she says. She begins by getting directly in their faces and then quickly escalates to pushing and shoving. The teacher tried switching her group several times, reviewing champs before group work and calling home, but it has not helped. The teacher has stopped allowing her to work with others for now. Tier 3. And in a situation like this, the slide says Tier 2 because you would move them from Tier 1 to Tier 2. But anytime we're talking about kids being aggressive or hurting somebody else, you're going to go straight to the principal, and they're going to go straight into at least a PBIS meeting or some sort of principal-parent contact. Jeremiah transferred to our school a week ago. He does not stay in his assigned seat during independent work time in any classes. He gets up to sharpen his pencil, throw away paper, or get more supplies. His teachers have a parent conference scheduled for next week to discuss the issues. Tier 1 or Tier 2? This is kind of a close one. I can say go either way. Let's see what the slide says. It is not Tier 2. Most of you put up Tier 1. There is a pattern of behavior, but he has not been in school long enough to know whether or not the Tier 1 is being effective. And I can actually speak to this. I work with 2 other teachers, and while we have similar beliefs in what our classes should look like, they all get run a lot differently. I've had students come and say, I had a student the other day walk out of my room, went straight to the bathroom. I say, why are you doing that? Because in my room, you do this, and then I dismiss you. And in his homeroom, he is allowed to get his bathroom stick. The teacher's watching. He puts it away because he gets 1 bathroom break a day, and he goes to the bathroom. So it's not unusual if a student has multiple teachers, or if a student is new to school and maybe they had different rules at their own campus. It's not unusual for them to not get used to the routine quickly. Go ahead. I didn't realize how many of these were. When Desiree is publicly redirected for off-task behavior, she walks out of the classroom and stands in the hall. This has happened a total of 5 times in multiple classes during the first grading period. Her teachers have tried to use private redirection, given her a place to go in the classroom when she is frustrated, and have visited with her mother. She says she doesn't like it when everyone looks at her after the teacher says something. Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3? Tier 2, of course. So we have, over a period of time, it's happened 5 times. There has been some attempts to contact the parents by the teacher. Remember, when we move on to Tier 3, that is where, even though the teacher is going to remain involved, that is when the administration is going to step in, and we're going to have to worry about PBIS meetings or some more serious consequences. How do we identify students needing Tier 2 supports? Okay, so there's 2 ways we do it. Either the teacher refers to Miss Arias, or there's a screening by the team, and that usually happens in PBIS committees. If you are in a PBIS, you can ask screening. Grant is our PBIS team lead this year, and he would be one of the people to talk to. Keep on. Keep on. All right, behavior has 4 functions. The first function is escape or avoidance. I would say 75% of all behavior is based off something that a student wants or a student doesn't want. Their behavior is based off something they're trying to avoid. So, one more time. Some examples of that was, I do my work in order to avoid having homework. So that would be a positive example. And then I doodle on my paper in order to avoid my work. Obviously that would be a negative example, but the behavior is still so that they can avoid something. We see a lot of this in 5th grade. I think we're seeing a lot of this school-wide. Kids love attention, and if they're not getting attention, especially at home, they're going to get it at school. And when you are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, the difference between positive attention and negative attention can sometimes look very similar. If a student gets everybody in the room to look at them when the teacher says, I am tired of your behavior, you need to go sit in the back of the room, every student in the room is looking at that kid. They got what they wanted. Their behavior allowed them to show off, even if it was just for a minute. So I participate in class because I receive verbal praise for my answers. That would be a positive behavior. And then I talk to my peers during independent work time because I want to tell them about my weekend. Obviously, that is what we don't want. The third function of behavior is tangibles or activities. Especially in the lower grades, you know that kids like to work for technology time, or they like to work for small presents. A lot of teachers, especially in the lower grades, they keep their treasure chests. So some tangibles, I do my work in order to earn time on technology. Kids love the iPads, they love the Chromebooks. Or I don't do my work in order to have screen time at home. A lot of times it is looking to see what the kid also doesn't want. And then of course we have our kids who have some special needs. We have ADHD kids. We even have some kids that are borderline on the spectrum. So they need that sensory stimulation. I know all of you guys in here know the importance of brain breaks. My personal opinion is I try not to have my kids sitting for more than 30 to 45 minutes. I know when you're talking about first grade, second grade, you're probably getting your kids moving around every 15 to 20 minutes. So some examples of that is I participate in PE because I get to run around and move. And we know from experience that your kids who have a hard time sitting still are generally the kids that excel in PE. They love to move. They're kinesthetic learners. On the bad side of that is I tap my pencil on the desk because I've been still and quiet for 30 minutes. I don't know about y'all, but my kids are taking a test after about 15 minutes. It is a struggle for me to not walk around, go talk to them, say something, pluck one of them in the head, just do the silly things I do. I have to sit there and control myself because I can't sit there for 30 minutes. It's ridiculous. All right, next one. Go ahead. One of the ways we track behavior is we look at first off, we look at what the behavior is we want to control. And then we look at what happened before the behavior, the antecedent, and we look at what happens after the behavior. Sometimes the behavior is about something that just happened. Sometimes the behavior is about something they know is getting ready to happen and they want to avoid it. So, student let's say the behavior is kicking feet, yelling and cursing, or they have their head on the desk. So what I talk about when I say things that happen, it could be whole group instruction. Maybe they were in whole group instruction and now they need to move around. They have a hard time in transitioning. They don't like to be redirected. Or you'll see it a lot with kids who haven't been used to being disciplined by somebody besides their parents. If their parents are disciplining, loss of privilege. The consequence could be planned ignoring. So they know that if they kick and yell, you're going to plan ignore. They now know that every time they kick and yell, you're going to stop paying attention to them, which means they can pretty much do whatever they want. They can put their head down, they can sit in the back of the room, whatever it is. They may know that they're going to get a peer response. If they kick and scream, everybody in the room is going to turn and look at them. They can get out of work or they can be sent out of the room. Sometimes kids get in their head, I hate that teacher, hate that teacher. And it may not be the teacher's fault, but that is the impression. It's probably not the teacher's fault. And so their number one goal is, I don't want to stay in that classroom. Go ahead. Go ahead. I don't know what all that was. Keep going. It's just a quick review. So again, there's 4 functions of the behavior. Here in the next couple of slides, I'm going to ask you guys to help me out a little bit. Pretty much the answer is going to be escape or avoidance, attention, tangibles and activities, or sensory stimulation, which would be our ADHDs. So when we are looking at behavior, we've got some sample students. They're not real kids. This is Timothy. Whenever Timothy is asked to work with a group, he refuses to participate. He puts his head down on the desk and will not work with anyone. If given the choice, he will complete the work alone. His teacher is having a hard time because small group work is a daily expectation, and she feels like it's impossible to always give him his own assignment. What would be the behavior you guys would want as classroom teachers would want to see replaced here? What do you guys think about him being part of daily classwork? Is that what we want? Thumbs up? There you go. So let's look. When Timothy is asked to work with the group, he refuses to participate. He puts his head down on the desk and will not work with anyone. We want him to work with the group. That's our behavior. So we have to look at what happens before the behavior. What happened before the behavior, of course, was the teacher asked him to do his work. He puts his head down and he refuses. We want him to do the group work, but he refuses to do it. Go ahead. So what his reward is out of that is I work independently. So Timothy has learned every time I put my head down, I get to work by myself. I don't want to work with anybody else, so I'm going to put my head down. Go ahead and click. So his possible functions here, of course, is he's escaped or avoiding the work. Some of the things we want to think about is what do we want the replacement behavior here to be? I think for the most part, we just want Timothy to work in the group. And we also want to gather any additional information we want. One of the questions I would ask a classroom teacher is, okay, is there somebody in Timothy's group that he specifically doesn't work with? Maybe there's a bully in that group. Maybe there's a kid that he knew from a previous class that he doesn't get along with. Number 2, Samuel. Anytime the class is moving from one activity to another, Samuel touches other kids and takes things from them. If a student says anything to Samuel, he gets even closer to them and says things like, "You got a problem?" or "Come at me, bro." The behavior here we want to replace is obviously Samuel's aggressive behavior. We don't want him in close physical contact, and we don't want him stealing things. Go ahead. So the problem here is transitioning. Samuel has not learned to transition. In this scenario, we see it hasn't come at any other time. The consequences is the peer response, and the possible functions would be tangibles, attention, or sensory. Maybe he's just been sitting and now he's ready to get jittery. Maybe he's ready to get jumping at somebody. Some things that I would ask, obviously the replacement behavior is to calm down. Additional information we might want to gather is this a game that they're playing on the playground? Has he been taught to transition before? Does he need some one-on-one skills times? Isaac charms everyone he meets. And I think I should have named this one Bryson. Isaac charms everyone he meets. He finds a way to smile and joke with every teacher. Just about every day, Isaac finds an excuse to leave the classroom during independent work time. Once he makes it out of class, Isaac spends the rest of the day wandering the halls and visiting with teachers and students. So obviously, the problem behavior is leaving the classroom. Right before that happens is independent work time. And his consequences is he's walking the halls and talking to people. If I was a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old and I got to get out of class during independent time and go talk to teachers and go talk to my friends in the hallway, of course that's exactly what I'm going to do. Go ahead. Okay, so when is a student ready to be referred to the PBIS team? A student is ready to be referred to the PBIS team when all Tier 1 and Tier 2 intervention strategies have been used. I'm at 30? Mm-hmm. All right. Tier 2 interventions and supports. Okay, so we have 3 things we want to do when we're talking about tier 2 behaviors. The first thing we want to do is we want to stop the behavior that we are looking at. We want to stop it from interrupting our class, interrupting with other students. But along with that, we need to teach the replacement behavior. It could be that behavior is because the student was never taught what the correct behavior was in the first place. Once we start seeing some positive behavior, we want to make sure we are reinforcing positively the behavior we want to see, and then we are not giving attention to the behaviors that we do not want to see. All right, so guidelines for tier 2 interventions and supports. Number 1, it needs to be focused on specific behaviors. If you have a student that has 6 or 7 different behaviors that you want to change, the best thing you can do is pick 1 or 2. If you have ever tried to diet and lose weight, you start off and you go to the gym and you cut out all the carbs and you watch what you eat and you start taking vitamins and you start going to sleep on time, and it takes about, if you're me, it takes about a week and you're like, I can't do all that. I just can't do it. And it's the same thing with kids. When you're trying to change their behavior, you need to pick 1 or 2 things at a time, focus on those things, try to ignore the other things, because the other behaviors, because those behaviors will be corrected in time. We want to focus on what we want the student to do, not what we want the student to stop doing. If a student comes into your room yelling, it is more effective to say, when you come into your room, I need a voice level 0, than when you come into my room, stop yelling. At least 6 weeks of consistent implementation and documentation is required. So when you're doing tier 2, the general guideline is 6 to 8 weeks. And you are going to gradually scale back the interventions. That is, of course, if they're being successful. You always want to do ongoing documentation. In a world of angry parents and state and federal laws, documentation is always your friend, including parent logs, Review 360, anytime you contacted the principal. We're all human. Administration forgets just like we do. And the best thing is, once you start dealing with a difficult kid, is tier 2, is tier 3, write everything down. You want your status checks to be weekly or twice a week, and those status checks will be check-ins with the children and just kind of giving a diagnosis of how you think they're doing. Are they making growth? You'll always want to be communicating with the parents. When a student moves to tier 2 interventions, hopefully by now you've called, you've sent home a letter, you've asked Ms. Gomez, Mr. Torres, or Ms. Naranjo to make a home visit. If you haven't been able to get a hold of them by phone, you're not getting a reply by letter, you've not gotten a reply by email, for those of you that do some of the in-class, like Class Dojo, then try to get one of the administrators to go to the house. And then once you establish that communication, you're going to check in with the child and you're going to check in with the parent. Go ahead. It's always about the replacement behavior. So, go ahead. When we have a student, and this is pretty common, when we have a student who is a blurter, obviously what we want is we want a student to raise their hand or to talk out in a particular time. I think I might have some repeat slides. Go ahead. Do we do Samuel? Yeah. All right, we got some repeats here. All right, so one of the things we use here at Bean Elementary is a check-in, check-out. I know I've been the check-in, check-out person for some people. The coaches have done it a couple of times. And what a check-in, check-out is it is a sheet, and that student will meet with another teacher besides the classroom teacher 1 to 3 times a day. 3 being the most severe cases. The student comes to the mentor or the person they check in and check out with, and they will check in and see how their day is. The goal of the mentor, of course, is to always be positive. Always be positive, always pushing them in the correct direction. Okay, so check in, check out is part of this prevent, teach, and reinforce. Hopefully it's preventing the behavior that the child is displaying. Obviously, as an adult, if you have somebody else on your side who is helping you put pressure or guide that student, it's always better. 2 voices, 3 voices are better than 1. Hopefully that mentor, when they are going in and checking in, they are reinforcing or explaining what the behaviors are that the teacher should see. And hopefully that reinforcement is verbally positive, could look like small rewards, anything like that. So how does this compare with current behavior contracts or sticker charts? I'm going to be honest with you, I hate sticker charts. I hate sticker charts taped down the desk. I hate sticker charts that go from kid to kid because they get too messy, they get too complicated. If they sit on the desk, they tend to get scribbled on, and usually after a while they lose effectiveness. As the teacher goes by and says, "You did a good job today," there's a sticker. I feel like the first time the enthusiasm is 100%. And then maybe by the 10th time, the enthusiasm is about 50%. And then by the 20th time, the student's like, "Hey, where's my sticker?" Now they're working for the sticker. And I'm not sure that's the tangible I want my kid to work for. I want them to work and know in their heart what the behavior is that they're going for. There is value in doing the right thing. There isn't really a lot of value in a sticker, in my opinion. So again, when we do check-in, check-outs, there are 1 to 3 target behaviors. They are manageable chunks of time. So this goes back to they're going to check in 1 to 3 times a day, and it just depends on the kid. If you have a very active kid, that student that student probably needs to check in 3 times a day. And obviously you want somebody like a coach or somebody who can provide them an activity as part of their reinforcement. If you have a student who maybe is having a problem 1 time a day and it's at a specific situation, then it may be another teacher, a past teacher from a previous year that they have built a relationship. And the goals always need to be reasonable. Again, we're not going to go from a kid who is off task 100% of the time to the perfect student within a week or 2. So the goals need to be set. I would like to see you start with 30% of your time you are working in your journal. After a week, 50% of the time you are completing everything in the journal. Okay, from here on out, 80% of the time you're completing everything in the journal. And then of course we have to monitor and adjust as we go. Sometimes it just doesn't work. Check in, check out doesn't always work. So we might have to adjust the plan. We might have to, we might have to adjust the plan, or we might have to change what the goals are altogether. Go ahead. All right, so some morning check-in routines. Always stay positive, try to pump them up for the day, get them excited about being at school. Go over what their goals are. Go back, please. Go over what their goals are and review what the expectations are. Sometimes it helps if a student gets to see something. So as the adult, it helps if you model it or you do a quick role play with them. You can say something as simple as, okay, so when your teacher calls on people, what are you going to do? Are you going to raise your hand or are you going to blurt? I'm going to raise my hand. Well, okay, tell me what that looks like. What does that look like when you raise your hand? Is that standing up at your chair, waving your hand and going, ooh, ooh, ooh? Or teacher, teacher, teacher? Or is that sitting quietly and raising your hand? Some of the script that you can use is a simple script, but obviously we don't want to see things too scripted. We don't want to look like we're just reading off a page. I'm so glad that you're here at school today. Remember that we're working on raising your hand to talk and staying in your seat 70% of the time. So again, this is a measurable goal, 70%. Tell me what your plan is when you meet those goals today. So maybe if they meet that goals, they come back for their check-in, check-out. What is it you want? Do you want a bag of Takis? Do you want to do 3 laps around the gym to get some energy out? Do you want 15 minutes of Chromebook time? What is it that we can help reinforce this behavior? But again, we always want to take it back to the idea that the behavior itself will become the reward. We want to move the kids from tangible rewards into intrinsic rewards. So what did you do yesterday that helped you be successful? We always, as teachers, we're trying to activate prior knowledge, and that's true in behavior too. Sometimes you have sometimes you have a child who does great for 2 or 3 days, and then they start to go backwards. You need to activate that prior knowledge. You need to go back and ask that child, okay, so what worked for you this day? Maybe it was, oh, well, I was not with Johnny that day. He was absent. Oh, well, if Johnny was absent, then maybe when you go back to class, you shouldn't be around him. Or what did you do yesterday that you need to change today to be successful? Try to get the kids to be mindful of their own behaviors. I know you're going to have a great day today and that you'll meet your goals. I'm looking forward to seeing how you did at the end of the day. This is always better than saying something, and I've heard it before. I know it sounds silly. I don't think you can do it. I don't think you can make. I don't think you. I mean, you could try, but I don't think you can do it because you've already put in the kid's head that adult thinks that I can't do it. Next one, please. So in the afternoon, after the kid has had their day, they have their check-in, check-out. You do a review of the goals. You always want to take it back to the goals. Are you successful? Were you successful? And what can you improve on? And it is better for the student to figure it out on their own than to have the teacher tell them, well, this is what you do wrong, so this is what you need to fix. The student should come up with their own plan and know what they are capable of doing. You always want to set a positive tone for the next day. If you can't do it today, how do you think you're going to be able to do it tomorrow? You don't want to be negative with the child, and you want to continue that positive reinforcement. The positive reinforcement should come from the mentor. The positive reinforcement should come from the teacher, and then when you send it home, honestly, I think the only reason why some of the parents come here is because they want the teacher to tell them how great their child is. And if you send something positive home, they're going to tell their kid, they're going to be excited, they're going to be proud. That's more positive reinforcement. Go ahead. Keep going. Okay, so here is an example of a behavior chart. Here we have the target behaviors. This is for up to 3. The ones that I created were thumbs up, thumbs down, and then I think a 5th, so I'm not sure what I did with the 3rd one. But you can do any forms. Some of them obviously are going to be more appropriate for a kinder child or a 1st grade child. Some of them are going to be more appropriate for a 5th grader. Here's another example of, this one seems to be for a child who has multiple subjects. So they can get a little more sophisticated for 5th graders. All right, so here's an example of a goal. Goal number 1, I will follow directions the first time they are given. And depending on the student, I would maybe put this at a 70% or something of that nature. And then you would give them a smile for I met my goal, I practiced my goal, or I really need to work on my goal. A lot of times with a check-in, check-out, there will be, besides a daily goal, there may be a weekly goal. So if you're doing 3 a day, we got 5 days in a week. Let's say that there are, if the student gets 12 points, they get a bag of Takis. So for me, it compares to other behavior contracts and sticker charts because the student gets more involved. Make sure you're monitoring and adjusting the plan. That's right. Go ahead to the next one. We've already talked about this. And last thing I want to talk about real quick is remember there are other supports in our school. We have after school activities. Kids who are involved in after school are more likely to try harder while they're here. They feel like they belong. We have lunch buddies and mentors, which is through Miss Gomez, as well as the clothing closet, the food to kids. We have Miss Arias, our counselor, and Communities in Schools has a number of other programs, that they provide for students. I want to thank everybody for being here today. I appreciate your time.